The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight on The Agenda.
There's lots of challenges in farming, lots of opportunity and optimism in farming as well. Some of the challenges right now, impacts of inflation, cost of production, rising cost of interest, mental health, lots of challenges across the farming.
Then, later on The Agenda.
Once we made 2 or 3 rounds in the field with the tractor driving itself, we kind of thought, why do we have to be in this cab?
Also tonight.
With diet culture, we end up having people really assigning value and moral judgment to the way we eat, the way we look, what we value in society.
Most farmers in this province wear many hats. It's always been the nature of the business, requiring different kinds of know-how and expertise. And that's continuing to evolve as farms become increasingly high-tech. Drew Spoelstra knows that well. He is a dairy farmer, and he's also president of the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. And he joins us now for more on the state of farming today and into the future. Drew, good to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Are you relatively new at the OFA as the president?
As the president, yeah, about 3 months. Been on the board for about 10 years.
Okay, good stuff. You've got a family operation in Binbrook, just south of Hamilton?
That's right, we do.
What goes on there?
We have a dairy and grain farm, milk about 60 cows, and just recently moved into a new robotic facility about 2 weeks ago. Work a couple thousand acres, corn, soybeans, wheat, and hay, raise some beef cattle and Clydesdale horses and 3 little girls.
Any Budweiser commercials with those Clydesdales?
No Budweiser commercials yet.
Not yet. What is, now you're a family farm, right?
That's right.
What generation are you?
I consider myself second generation, and my parents started the business.
Okay.
And my wife and I are now coming into it and working alongside them.
38,000 family farms across Ontario. What's
Yep.
the biggest problem they all have in common?
There's lots of challenges in farming, lots of opportunity and optimism in farming as well. Some of the challenges right now, impacts of inflation, cost of production, rising cost of interest, mental health, lots of challenges across the farming sector, but I don't think there's anything we can't overcome, and hopefully we're working towards trying to find some solutions for those things.
That is the can-do spirit you hear from farmers all the time, isn't it? Doesn't matter what the weather is, how bad it is, you can do it at the end of the day.
You have to be an optimist in
Right.
business. Yeah.
What about access to labor? Can you get enough people?
Certainly labor's a challenge as well. You know, we have solutions, I think, through temporary worker programs and things like that, but there are a ton of unfilled positions every year in this industry. And some of that, I think, is being replaced with technology. But some of those jobs just aren't getting done because we don't have the labor and don't have access to labor in rural areas.
And the consequences of not being able to get access to that labor are what?
It's lost revenue for the farm business, basically.
Lost revenue, meaning if you could do better if you had more people. Is that the gist of it?
Sure, you can produce more, sell more produce. Things like that. So.
Okay. What can you tell us about why you thought taking over the family farm business was the right move for you? Because obviously a lot of second and or third generation people are taking a pass on that option. What did you see?
Well, farming's always been in my blood. It's always been something I want to do. You have to have a passion for it, or you know, really there's no sense getting into it. Nobody wants to get those calls in the middle of the night to go out and check on a cow or check on a horse or, you know, finish off this field here or there. So you really have to want to do the job. You have to have a love for it, and it's been bred into me. It's something that I've always done throughout my life from a very young age, been involved with the farm, and I never had any other ideas on things that I wanted to do. Not everybody's in that boat. Lots of people leave the farm for other opportunities, and you know, that's certainly fine, but we're doing our best, I think, to talk a lot about succession planning and ways to bring the next generation back to the farm. And you know, finding ways to support those intergenerational transfers and finding ways to support the farm business sustainably going forward into the future.
What time does your day start every day?
All depends on the day. When the robot calls now, I'm up at 5 o'clock because it didn't do something it was supposed to do, or a cow's not doing something they're supposed to do. But typically, you know, 6 o'clock every day.
Well, that's not completely outrageous.
No, it's not.
You're not
outrageous.
milking the cows at 4 a.m.
No. Lots of times, though, you know, we'll go all night if we have to beat a rainstorm or to get ahead of the next weather pattern or to get this field done or that job done. So,
Do you have siblings?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
How was it decided that you were going to take over the family farm instead of one of them?
They've never been involved with the farm like I have. So one's a teacher, one's in construction, and I ended up being the farmer.
So more process of elimination than anything.
Yeah,
You didn't have
mostly.
to fight them for it.
No.
Okay, got it. Are there, as we suggested, not every family is in the same circumstances as yours, in as much as there isn't always that next generation ready to take over or who want to take over. So when that happens, what happens to those farms?
Well, typically, farmers are always looking for someone, to bring into the business. Farmers have a lot of pride in their operations. I think they're always looking for that opportunity to bring someone in, to pass it down to, even if it's not their own children, to someone else that's interested in the business. Ultimately, if that can't be facilitated, they sell the farm.
I mean, that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
Are a lot of these farms turning into future housing developments or condos or whatever?
If they're in the right area, certainly, yeah, there's a lot of pressure on farmland from other uses.
What do you think of that?
Well, obviously, we'd like to see farmland remain farmland. Our slogan at OFA is "Farms and Food Forever." It's an important part of daily living. Lots of people like to eat 3 times a day, and we need to continue to produce food here, food, fiber, and fuel and flowers in Ontario for that to happen. So, we'd like to see farms stay in farmland, but we understand there is a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on housing. And, certainly the government is, I think, doing their best to try and find solutions for housing. That includes also housing in rural areas. We've talked a lot with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing about building up our rural areas instead of expanding them out. And that ensures we have places for people to live and people in rural areas that want to fill those jobs on farm.
Do you think there's anything that either the Federation that you represent or the governments of the day can do to ensure that farmland stays farmland?
Sure. Well, we can implement policies that are there to protect farmland for the long-term foreseeable future. We can make sure that we do our best to build better, higher density housing, that we intensify our cities, our urban areas inside of our urban boundaries.
So this is not an insoluble problem?
No, I don't think so. I think there's lots of solutions.
Okay. You mentioned something a couple of times here, and I let it skate by the first couple of times, but I want to pick up on it now. We don't necessarily think of, well, put it this way. I mean, I'm from Hamilton, and I don't necessarily think of a farm in Binbrook, just south of Hamilton, as being sort of on the cutting edge of robotics and AI. But you've just made an investment in robotics on your farm, right?
That's right.
What are you doing?
So we built a brand new dairy facility. We have robotic milking, automated feeding, and automated manure collection in our barn. So, a cow has free choice to the robot to be milked whenever she wants during the day. And I was looking at some of the data yesterday. Our top visit cow is going through about 4.5 times a day versus the 2 times a day she would have been milked in our own barn, our old barn. Sorry. So,
What did that cost you?
it's significant. Yeah, the whole project close to $3 million.
$3 million. Where'd you get the money for that?
We borrowed it.
And do you have any doubts about being able to make that work for you?
Not right now, no. I mean, we've been able to obviously access that funding because of the size of our operation and the collateral that we have to put up. My parents have been in business for 40 years, so it's not like we're just jumping in.
No, but my guess is your dad never considered a day would come when robotics would be a part of the operation on that family farm.
No.
So how's everybody adjusting to that?
It's a process for sure. It's as much about training the farmer as it is about training the cows. But we've incorporated a lot of technology into our farm over the past 20 years as new technologies have become available. Precision agriculture is a huge thing in the agriculture business right now. And, we've worked a lot with GPS technology, with GPS mapping on the field side. And now we're making those investments into our dairy side, to see better returns in the future and, hopefully a better work-life balance in the barn with the robot milking the cows versus us. And, I can spend some more time hopefully with my family when I'm home and that's the way to get that next generation involved as well. My wife can now go to the barn, take care of things on her own if she has to, while we're out working in the field or doing something else.
Got it. My last 20 seconds here. We got an Ontario budget coming up later this month. What do you want to see in there for farmers?
I'd like to see continued investment in infrastructure, roads, bridges, broadband, cellular coverage, mental health, social services across rural areas. We need to get people out there in rural areas to fill those jobs like we talked about before, and that requires strong infrastructure investment in those communities. Investment in risk management program is key for farmers going forward. We've had some pretty successful years last few years because of higher commodity prices, but we're seeing sort of a downturn in that right now. And things like the risk management program will hopefully help some of us get through some of the harder times that we might have coming.
March 26th is budget day. We'll keep an eye out and see if any of that's in there.
Looking forward to it.
Drew Spoelstra, President, Ontario Federation of Agriculture. Drew, thanks for making the trip into TVO for us tonight. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Steve.
Maybe when you hear about robotics and artificial intelligence, you don't think of the rolling hills and pastures of Ontario, but maybe you should. Farmers in this province are among the early adopters and innovators in a technological shift they expect to be inevitable and widespread. With us to explain, in Orangeville, Ontario, Mary Ruth McDonald. She's professor and research program director at the University of Guelph. And here in our studio, Bill Vandenhoover. He is co-founder of Bold Robotics, based in Vineland, Ontario. And Chuck Bersich. He is president of Haggerty Ag Robotics, based in Bothwell, in Chatham-Kent, Ontario. And it's great to have you two here in our studio. Mary Ruth, thanks for being there on the line from the University of Guelph for us. And Chuck, to you first. I guess I just wanted to find out what drew you, what was that connection that drew you from your line of work to farming, where you wouldn't necessarily associate robotics?
Well, I think, as farmers in the area, growing up, I've always liked technology. I've always liked robotics. I think whether it was, I always wanted my own R2-D2 or C-3PO kind of thing. And
Star Wars reference for those who don't remember.
Yeah, 100%. And so that's what I grew up with. And then, my brother and I have always tried to introduce technology into our farming operation as a way to try to improve things year after year. And so we have a lot of that technology in our tractors and stuff.
Where's your farm?
It's just outside of Bothwell,
okay.
down in Lambton County. We have a very traditional corn and soybean operation. And when we look at our equipment, I think our very first auto steer system in the tractor, once we made 2 or 3 rounds in the field with the tractor driving itself, we kind of thought, why do we have to be in this cab? And that was probably close to 20 years ago when that first inkling got into my head.
And the first robots showed up when?
In 2020.
So you waited a little while before introducing.
We had to wait a while till there were some that were ready to be used.
Okay. Mary Ruth, let me get to you next. You're primarily working with vegetables. Have I got that right?
That's right. Onions and carrots especially.
Okay. And where's your place?
Well, the research station is right in the Holland Marsh, just beside Highway 400.
And what kind of robotic innovations have you introduced to your operations?
Well, we started out with drones to try to do crop scouting and did a 3-year trial on that. Didn't work out as well as we'd hoped, but taught us a lot. And then with the involvement with Chuck and the introduction of these autonomous robots, it seemed like it would solve a number of problems, especially weed control in the area is a real challenge, herbicide-resistant weeds, and just the cost of labor to do hand weeding.
Gotcha.
So it kind of all came together that way.
Now, let me ask our director, Sheldon Osmond, have we got a still picture here of the farm droid? Can we bring that up right now? A solar-powered, okay, I don't even know how to describe this, but so, Mary Ruth, how about for those who are listening on podcast, do you want to describe what we're looking at here?
Well, it's a big solar panel on top. That's the first thing that you see. And below that, wheels, and right now we're looking at a cultivator. So it's like you took a small piece of farm equipment and put a big solar panel on top of it.
And what does it do?
It can seed when it's got a seeder attached, and after it's finished seeding, it goes through the field and it cultivates to control the weeds. The really cool thing about seeding is that it geolocates or remembers exactly where every seed is that it puts in the ground.
Wow. You want to tell me how much that thing cost?
Sorry. Chuck is the expert on
Okay,
that.
Chuck, I'm going to you then. How much that thing cost?
About 130,000.
I was going to say, it doesn't look cheap.
Yeah. Relative to farm equipment, it's actually not too bad.
Because other stuff costs a lot more. Okay, gotcha. Okay, Bill, let's get you in here as well. Engineering background?
Yep.
Okay. Greenhouse spaces, primarily your line of work?
It is now. In the past, I was more in heavy industry. I gained a lot of experience in steel mill automation, lumber mills, and I've did that for about 11 years. And that's where I started working with my business partner, Willem. And it was a long commute, so we had a lot of time to talk, and that's kind of where Bold was born. We were looking for opportunities to use our expertise and in an industry that, there was a lot of opportunity.
So tell us where the connection between robotics and farming came into play for you.
It's just there's a lot of manual labor, a lot of opportunity, and there has been a lot of robotics in certain greenhouse sectors, like specifically the vegetables. But in the the potted plants, cut flowers, there wasn't as much robotics actually in there. So it's just a good opportunity to us to come up with new technology for those spaces. And
who are your customers typically?
Potted plant growers. So a lot of them are in the Niagara area. So there's a lot of greenhouses.
And what are they using robotics for?
Picking plants off tables. Grading, sorting. Just spacing. The ones that we do are more on the packaging side, so after the greenhouse, so before it gets into the box. So we've done a bunch of automation for the packing side. Up before we started, there was nothing. That was just all manually done. So we're finding our way in the industry. It's been about 6.5 years, and there's still a lot to do, a lot to discover, and as we go. And
well, let me pursue that with you, Chuck, because I'm trying to imagine the conversation you are having with sort of more traditional farmers who never think or never thought that robotics would be an option for them, and you introduce it to them. What kind of reaction are you getting?
I think, like, 3 or 4 years ago, the reaction was, sometimes people would see the robot and they would just walk past it because they didn't know what it was. And some farmers will look at the robot and they will say, it's too small, it's too big, it's too different. Really what we're after with farmers when we're having a conversation is we're trying to find ones who look at the machine and who are actually thinking about how could I incorporate that into my farming operation. A lot of times it takes a person to really think about every task they're doing and breaking that task down into very small little pieces and saying, how do we automate that single piece, which could be, removing weeds, it could be planting, it could be something like that. And the farmer has to be willing to have that conversation.
So let me ask Mary Ruth about that. You two, we've already established, sort of collaborated here on a big 6-figure piece of equipment that you're using. How did that get started? Who approached whom, and who made the sale, and that kind of thing?
I'm part of Ag Robotics working group, and Chuck and OMAFRA weed specialist, Kirsten Obeid, were the ones that talked to me about starting to test the agricultural robots in our marsh. And even prior to that, actually, John Kelly, who's now Deputy Minister of Agriculture, got me in touch with Tarek, who is the developer of another ag robot, the GOAT. So I was just talking about the vegetable production end with him. And then it was really great when we actually had these other robots on the ground that we could start working with. And of course, I'm an academic, so we're doing the research, counting the hours, This year, we're going to be comparing the tractor-driven activities to the robot right beside it in the field for the whole summer.
Now, was it a tough sale to get you to sort of, I guess, understand that, yeah, robotics can play a role in your farm and that you ought to give it a shot?
Not at all. Was really interesting. As with anything in research, there's always learning curves, some frustrations with the technology, but it looked really interesting, and it looked like it had so many applications for the growers that I work with in the Holland Marsh.
And how well is it working?
Good. The two that we looked at last year, some setup in the spring, but that happens with any tractor, any equipment. And then they worked amazingly smoothly during the summer. And the technicians who work with me kept coming up with great ideas on how to make them work even better. So it was a lot of fun. It was really interesting to see.
Chuck is very happy to hear that. Chuck, while you have the floor here, I gather you are testing robots from around the world. There are other countries who've got their wares here. Mm-hmm. Why are they doing that in the province of Ontario, testing here?
I think what we have shown to other countries or other developers, whether they're from Canada, the U.S., around the world, is that Ontario is a very unique place. Within a 2-hour drive of Toronto, basically, there's almost every crop under the sun. Everything from cauliflowers to celery to lettuce, carrots, onions, sweet corn. You can see farmers who grow corn and soybeans just like they do in the Midwestern United States. You can see greenhouses. You can see all that kind of agriculture.
So we got it all here.
We have it all. And on top of that, we also have an excellent research infrastructure, like a university network, that's very interested in the space, in agriculture as well as technology. And Ontario has a manufacturing background through the automotive sector. And a lot of the robotic technology, when you think about it, directly translates from that sector to field robots.
Okay, well, I think we got some more video here. Sheldon, you want to bring this up here? This is, and you can help me understand what this is, again, for people listening and won't see this video. Roam, how do you describe this? Roam IO HCT?
That's correct.
What does all that mean?
So about 3 or 4 years ago, we worked with an engineering firm, a company out of Oshawa, Ontario, and they had built a prototype robot. And so we had them develop this model of the Romeo. So this is a tracked robot. It's about the size of a lawnmower. It can run up to 8 kilometers an hour, which is fairly unique for robots in this space. And then it's a multi-purpose electric tractor.
Okay, you called it Romeo, and I just want to let people know, it's R-O-A-M.
Yep, Roam. I-O is, I say it Romeo, but I mean, that's Roam I-O is probably more correct.
And what does the I-O stand for?
Input, output.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
there we go.
And then the
HCT?
And then the HCT that's on the end is Haggerty Creek, is our company.
That's your company.
Because we
Okay.
helped them develop this.
So I think a lot of people watching right now will never have seen that before.
That's
that
correct.
thing is doing the job that normally a lot of people have to do.
That's right.
And the advantage of this is what?
So the advantage is that, I haven't met a farmer yet who has too many employees. Generally, farmers are always looking for more employees. And so what we're trying to do with the robotics is say, how do I take my existing staff and add more value? How can I have them doing something more valuable than, let's say, riding in an ATV and spreading clover seed on a cold day on a wheat field?
Which a machine could do.
Which a machine can definitely do.
So you figured that out.
Well, we hope so.
You think so? How much is that thing?
That machine was approximately $80,000.
So even more reasonably priced than the other thing we saw.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there, now when you're getting into this kind of thing, I mean, we've heard a combine obviously be more expensive than a lot of the pieces of equipment we've talked about so far. But is it a tough sell to get people to try to borrow the money to go get this kind of equipment?
Yes. So with the greenhouse industry, I guess with farming too, it's very seasonal. Your ROI is very much reduced because the utilization is much narrower as well. So it is more difficult to actually convince growers, say, to use a piece of automation or a solution because of that. The ROI is just not always there.
So what do you tell the skeptical ones about why this can save their lives?
I think a lot of them do see the potential. Also, with having more and more technology out there, we can show different installations we've done. We have good references with some of our other customers, and that's really helped a lot. Also, just being in the greenhouse space, like our focus is a greenhouse industry, and that also helps build our credibility with our customers. Like we know who we're talking to, where the needs are, and just building those relationships has helped.
Mary Ruth, I guess I'm wondering if this is sort of a niche idea for the few, or whether you see this catching on with more widespread use. What do you think?
I think it's definitely going to catch on, but of course there will be lag time. But Chuck was talking about some of the autopilot, if you will, for tractors, and that has the value of that's been quite obvious to a lot of growers. And we have growers in the marsh who are really keen on having some of these robots in the field. So, of course, farmers are as diverse as anyone else. You'll have your rapid adopters and some that may never see the value, but labor pressure, labor shortages, herbicide-resistant weeds, robots are going to get cheaper and cheaper. Sorry, Chuck, and labor is going to get more and more expensive. So I do think it's inevitable.
I guess that's the thing. I mean, we heard, 40, 50 years ago, a lot of the arguments about automation, that you're going to take work away from people who need those jobs. But I guess, and Mary Ruth, you tell me if I'm wrong here, in the case of farming, the labor shortage is kind of profound in some spots, that this isn't really taking away people's jobs, it's really helping farmers do their jobs. Is that fair to say?
For sure. The horticultural industry brings in a lot of temporary workers from Mexico and the Caribbean each year. For 2 or 3 decades, there haven't been enough people in Ontario to fill those jobs. And the temporary workers are going to get more and more expensive all the time as well.
Chuck, how many robots have you bought and modified?
So starting like last season, we had 18 different robots that we had either purchased or modified or deployed out across Ontario. And this year, we're on track to be at 30. Doing
Various jobs along the way, like what?
So the bigger robots spread fertilizer. The farm droids are seeding onions and carrots. We have one that's actually working in some flowers as well. The other robots are all primarily in weed control, so in just different forms of cultivation.
How'd you afford to buy all this stuff?
So we had some help from a startup venture capital group. We didn't take any venture capital. We had some consulting help from a group called RH Ventures out of London, which assisted us. I used some of my own capital, so I invested my own money into acquiring some of these machines. And then we've also had assistance from just standard financial institutions to help us finance this. The last piece is that we were able to acquire a couple of grants, from the provincial government, which were very beneficial to help us get started.
Do we need to see more of that? What's your view on that?
Yeah, it definitely has been very helpful with this. Like right now, there's the Agri Fund going on that.
Agri-Tech Innovation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's been a door opener because it's not always easy to justify spending that much money on a piece of automation. And with the programs going on now, it's like up to $100,000 that you get 50% cost share. So that makes it very advantageous to actually invest.
I assume you're into this for 7 figures at this stage, eh?
Yeah, easily. And what the funding does is for some of the robots that are somewhat commercial, the funding is maybe not as important. But when we are bringing something that is novel to the marketplace, that might only be the first one or the second one or whatever, farmers are a little risky because it's not actually the technology that they're worried about. It's the fact that they have to change their farming operation a little bit in order to use that technology. And that's actually what the risk is.
Here's another shot. Can we bring this up, Sheldon? I'm on number 10 here. And I don't know how to pronounce this thing, Chuck, so you're going to have to help me. NAIO. How do you pronounce
That's
that?
the NIO-Oz.
The NIO-Oz for weeding and hoeing.
That's
Now,
correct.
why is it called a NIO-Oz?
So NIO Technologies is a company out of France. They're probably one of the leaders in autonomous robotics for agriculture. They've been kind of at it. They're one of the longest that have been at it, at least 10 years. That Oz robot is probably one of the most popular robots around the world. There's well over 300 of them that have been deployed.
And it's Oz, O-Z.
OZ, just Oz, because and they call it that so it sounds friendly.
Not from Australia or anything
Nope.
like that. Okay,
So-
got it. Now, Mary Ruth, I got to ask this question. I'm sorry, but I imagine one of the fears that farmers have is what happens when these things break down. I mean, they don't know how to fix them. So have you found that to be a problem?
Occasionally they do break down, as any equipment does. We've had really good communication with, say, the people at NIO. And sometimes we're talking to people and it's the middle of the night in Europe, or, conversely, they want to do something, it's 9 p.m. here. But they've been communicating with us very well. Once in a while, it takes time to get a part, but that happens for tractors in Ontario as well.
Sure.
So as long as you've got internet and cell phones, it's been working reasonably well.
Bill, I assume this is not equipment that farmers know how to fix themselves.
We do like to get the farmers up to speed on the technology we provide. Because we're located in the heart of the greenhouse industry in Niagara there, because we're close by, we can easily support them because we develop technology so we know it inside and out. But also we want to equip our end users to be able to run the machines and do some minor tweaks or modifications if needed. And then if it's something more major, then we're within 30 minutes to support them. So.
Do you know if there are any colleges in Ontario right now that either have courses in how to make these machines or fix these machines or that kind of thing?
I think just in general, like engineering schools, like that's the foundation, right? And then from there you grow. So there's a lot, with automation, you can automate anything. So, I mean, to be more specific to the agriculture, I think it's just kind of like the channel you go to. And
because, Chuck, I'm wondering about that. Obviously we have, for example, at Ontario Tech, it's very much involved in the auto industry and in graduating young people who know how to deal in that business. Is that going to happen with this as well?
Oh, 100%. And there are several schools that have reached out to us wanting to be in this agricultural robotic space in some form, whether it's in the greenhouse sector. And it's not just crops, there's lots of robotics in the livestock sector as well. And so I know that Fanshawe College has reached out, Lambton College, Niagara College, the University of Windsor, University of Guelph, Western, Waterloo. A lot of these schools, and I apologize for any that I haven't mentioned, but a lot of these schools have reached out to us. They want to partner on projects. And I think a lot of this relates to educating the workforce of the future. And it's not just going to be, cars and trucks. If we can have a manufacturing sector on agricultural robotics as well, why not?
You've been involved in the creation and alteration of numerous different kinds of robotics here, right, for farming?
Yep.
Do you have one that you're particularly in love with, and why?
I would say that they all have their pluses and minuses. I really do like the Farm Droid, the one from Denmark that Mary Ruth had talked about, just because of how nicely built it is. And it was built by two brothers that founded the company. I've met them both. It's a very, very well-built machine. But the reason why I like that one is that they thought about the logistics of that machine, the solar panel, how it operates, and how the farmer is actually going to have to interact with that. They really thought that through, and that's why I like that.
Mary Ruth, how about you? Was there one piece of technology that you particularly enjoy?
Well, I have to go with the Farm Droid also, but Chuck did mention the Oz, and there's sort of the big brother of the Oz called the Oreo, and it's got kind of eyebrows and eyes painted on it, again, to make it look friendly. But the Farm Droid, the solar panel is great. The battery charges while it's working and it's in the sun. So it's, for us, it's worked 24 hours a day. It's easy to operate from your cell phone or iPad. It's small, it's light, so it contributes to sustainable agriculture, and of course, being solar reduces greenhouse gas emissions. So it's just got so many things going for it.
Gotcha. Bill, how about you?
Well, it depends. So we've done a number of like robotic applications, which, I mean, the robots have a whole different appeal and attraction. Just really cool having a 6-axis arm moving around and doing different functions. We have a few cells. So we got one, it's a potted plant packaging cell. So it will take the potted plant, put it into a pot cover or a mylar cover, and then put a label, like preprint or a print on demand label, and then put it into a sleeve. So it does that automatically. So you get a raw plant coming in and get a finished plant ready to be in the box coming out of there. That has a lot of different things going on there. And that was one of our first products that we developed. So that has a lot of sentimental meaning to us. But there's also a lot of simpler applications where even just labeling, so we've developed, it's called a pot cover labeling machine. And historically, they've done it all by hand. They take the pot covers out of the box. So it's just a cover that goes around the plant that you'll see in the store, like a little paper cover. And so they'll just take the whole stack, take it out, put a label on, millions of them a year. And it's just a very repetitive task. And that was something that we identified earlier on and said, oh, look, it's a very easy task. I mean, pot covers, they can be tricky to handle depending on the material, but the actual function of that is very repetitive. It's just like, take it out, label. And so we, that's something that's made a really big impact on the growers, and it's had good traction.
The names here, Chuck, are a little funky, but I guess you can't use C-3PO or R2-D2. That's copyright.
No, or you don't want to use Terminator either.
No, good point. Good point. No, you're growing, not terminating.
Yep.
I want to thank the three of you for coming on to TVO tonight and talking to us about something that I suspect very few people know is going on out there. So we thank you for that. There's our three-shot from left to right. Bill Vandenhoover, and there's Chuck Bersich and Mary Ruth McDonald. Thanks a lot, you three.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Not only does the WHO say that artificial sweeteners don't do any good for weight loss for most people, but the organization also warned they may even do harm. With us on how to sort out the hype from the science, let's welcome Mark Schatzker. He is the author most recently of The End of Craving, Recovering the Lost Wisdom of Eating Well. And Leanne D'Souza Kenny, Assistant Professor of Global and Public Health at the University of Toronto and the founder of Nutrition and Food Literacy Canada. And it's good to have you two back in our studio. Nice to see you again.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, so here's what the WHO is saying, that not only is this stuff maybe not doing you any good, but it could pose some health risks. And, you know, we got to fact check all these things, right? So, Mark, start us off. How concerned should we be?
I would say concerned insofar as, you know, diet, obesity, metabolic disease is a very serious health problem. And if we have some idea as to what's causing that, we should take it seriously. So we should think about what we eat.
Leanne, what do you say?
Yeah, I think it's great that the World Health Organization put this out, because what it does is give us a chance to call to mind why we make the decisions we make, why we make the food choices we do. Where do we see artificial sweeteners in our environment that we're passively consuming versus those that we're actively making a choice? Because we're not really that concerned about the one-off time you might have a diet soda at an occasion. We're talking about the consistent consumption. It's in your snacks, it's in your coffee that you may have multiple times per day. So it gives us cause to pause pause and think about what's in our food systems and our food environments.
Cause to pause, but are you going so far as to say we should actively try not to ingest any of this stuff anymore?
I think there's good reason to go back to basics and start to have foods that are your whole foods, and to think about the practices of why we're consuming, dig a little deeper on why are we consuming those foods? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Weight loss has been, one of the things that people have really moved towards artificial sweeteners for, but as you said, there's no real evidence to suggest that it's beneficial, and the risks may outweigh the benefits.
Mark, do you want to talk to us about the difference between natural and artificial sugars and what they do to us?
Yeah, it gets very technical and complicated. Generally, when people talk about artificial sweeteners, they're talking about sweetening agents that deliver sweetness with fewer calories. So for the public, that would be things like aspartame, NutraSweet, but also things like the sugar alcohols that have technical names like xylitol. They're kind of organic compounds that have some calories, but at a higher level of sweetness than sugar. Scientists get into talking about non-nutritive sweeteners, low energy sweeteners. It gets very complicated, but it's essentially trying to deliver sweetness with fewer calories. The idea being, I can give you all the pleasure of sweetness, but I can pull back the calories. So it's a win. You get to enjoy your food, but you don't get the negative hit of calories. So on the superficial, simple level, it sounds like a great idea. But the question is, of course, is it actually doing what we think, or is it doing harm?
And I'll ask you the same question. Are you at the point yet where you are saying we should actively avoid these things?
Well, I would put it this way. Why should we eat them? These are not natural substances. So I would say the case has to be made, not should we avoid them, but why should we consume these things? It's like if it's something like a drug, we don't say, give me a reason not to take it. We say, give me a reason to take it. So I would say that's the standard that we should be looking at.
I'm going to play along. You say, why should we take these things? Because we've been hit over the head for ages that sugar, like real sugar, stuff you put in your coffee and tea, is terrible for you. And so we're looking for an alternative that gives us the same kind of hit. So you're saying, why should we take that? That's why we take it.
Yes, so, okay, good point. But then when you look at the science, if you look at, let's call the positive evidence, it's not all that compelling. People lose a pound, maybe 2 pounds. It's not, the kind of dramatic weight loss that people are looking for. And then when you look at the negative stuff, it looks more scary. So it just doesn't seem all that compelling to me.
All right. Artificial sweeteners like stevia, often marketed as healthier, skinnier replacement in snacks and drinks. It's in Diet Coke, I guess, that kind of thing. What's the connection between healthy eating trends and the diet culture, which we are immersed in?
Well, the diet culture and the healthy eating trends feed each other, pun intended. And what ends up happening is that with diet culture, we end up having people really assigning value and moral judgment to the way we eat, the way we look, what we value in society, what we uphold as good or attractive. And this has huge consequences, not just for adults, but for children too. It perpetuates an environment that has people thinking about food in the wrong way and thinking about food as a tool to wield a certain body type or wield a certain image, instead of thinking about what it really means to eat healthy and getting back to the idea of joy in food.
Joy in food?
Absolutely.
As in?
As in taking the time to eat together as a family, the days people use recipes and thought about the ingredients that go into their food, comparing recipes and thinking about what kinds of meals we're going to share together, those meals that are of our ancestors, coming back to that experience, I think is really important.
Do people have time for that anymore?
I think they should. One of the most interesting statistics I ever came across was that when you look at Italy and France, they consume far fewer calories than Americans do, and yet it takes them something like double the time to eat. So their approach to food is obviously very different. So yeah, I would say if we don't have the time, we should find the time.
That's a cultural thing though, right? I mean, they've kind of got it built into their lives that dinner is going to take a particular amount of time and they're going to have it at a particular time of the day. And it's almost like a daily festival. Whereas our thing seems to be, let's just get it done fast because we got to get on to the next thing.
Yes.
They're right, we're wrong.
Exactly. The interesting thing is that we seem to regard food, we look at it kind of pharmacologically. We think about nutrients, protein, calories, vitamins, and what happens when all these molecules get into our stomach and get metabolized. It's kind of everything from the neck down. It doesn't work. Even the scientists that study this for a living have no idea how many calories they consume in a day or how much protein they consumed, how much they need. When you look at Europeans, I think Italy's the best example. They approach food with the point of view, they revere the products of the earth and the sea, and they approach each meal with the intent to enjoy the company. The meal is nourishing both physiologically, but also psychologically. And I think it's so hard for us to grasp that because we've been fighting this war on food and thinking, well, we can invent these miracle molecules that are just going to be this simple silver bullet fix. And I think we have a lot more to learn from them.
What you're talking about is a massive cultural shift in the way we think about all this.
Absolutely.
I mean, they've been doing it that way for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Whereas we seem to love anyway, do it fast, let's get on to the next thing. How do you imagine us sort of changing our whole approach to a healthier approach to eating?
Yes, we definitely have engineered our lives around how do we get it out of the way so we could get on to the things that we really want to do. And I think that's going to be a huge question for us as Canadians as we go into the future and think about what do we want for ourselves, what do we want for our nation, for future generations of Canadians, what do we hope for us? Do we want to shift a culture? And this is going to involve some sort of mass movement where we engage people, invite them in partnership, not sort of one group telling another group what to do, but to come together and make some of these decisions, grapple with the hard science, grapple with the knowledge translation of the science to figure out how do we do this. And one of the projects that I'm working on with Nutrition and Food Literacy Canada, which I recently started, is to bring together Canadians from across Canada, different sectors, to talk about how do we bring nutrition and food literacy into the education system. Right now, we don't have a robust curriculum in nutrition or food. It's kind of tethered to a health curriculum or gym class, but we don't actually interweave it through kindergarten to grade 12, and we don't have teachers that are informed on it. And then necessarily so that teachers will avoid it because they have way too much to do and they don't have the training in it. But if we go to the level of Teachers College, we may be able to educate teachers in Teachers College and students K to 12 through curriculum so that in time you have teachers and students, by extension their families and communities, being able to talk about these topics, not shy away from them, grapple with the things that are sort of unknown, those so-called wicked problems, and really talk about how we figure out nutrition and food literacy in this country.
And I think also it's really about the enjoyment of food. Yeah. One thing I'm concerned about in school is it's very much calorie oriented, and they get a lot of young girls very worried about what they eat. They have this idea that, fat is toxic. They can't eat any carbs, any sugar. And they have this idea the only foods that are healthy is like a sliced grapefruit, grapes, half an avocado. And this is not a sustainable diet. It's interesting when you look in Japan that they teach children how to eat, how to enjoy food, how do we think about food. And we're so far away from that. I think one of the big mistakes was getting rid of home ec, getting rid of teaching kids how to cook. The thinking is, because we're teaching the girls, well, we should teach the boys too. I can't, people graduate from high school not knowing how to cook and not knowing what credit card debt is. And those are two things that get you into an awful lot of trouble.
Isn't that incredible? That is true. We need to, these are two skills that will be so important to you for the rest of your life. And these are things that are very much lowballed by the education system right now. How do we turn that around?
It's a great question. It's cultural, and it seems like turning around an aircraft carrier. And there's certainly no simple answer. There's certain things I look to, though, that I think are positive. I always think the movement to craft beer, it sounds odd, but it's really positive in the sense that people are becoming so much more attached to beer that has a tradition behind it, where they might have an idea of who made it or what the ingredients were. We see things like that with cheese that we're getting, we want craft cheeses. So we're slowly, it's not across the board, but I think there is positive evidence that people, farmers market is another good example. So I think there can be change. It just has to take place, in a lot of different ways.
It takes a long time to turn that aircraft carrier
really does.
around. I want to pick up on your notion of we got to start them young, right? To get kids understanding this. And you've written, I gather, a children's book called Nutritious and Delicious, A Fruitful Conversation for Kids. What kind of impact do you hope that has?
Well, I think it's a conversation starter, and that's why it's called Fruitful Conversation, because it gets kids and families to start talking about it. Some of people who've read the book already say, my kid reads it one week, and the next week they have a different idea because we headed to a farmer's market, or they had a conversation somewhere about it, or they went to the grocery store. So getting kids involved in this process is so important. Even when we look at nutrition and food literacy as a whole, and the concept of literacy, meaning have agency over decision-making and over the knowledge that you learn not just to learn it, but to also apply it. There's so many opportunities to bring those other pieces in that are, again, harkening back to the time we used to have home ec. And now we know better too, though. So we know we don't need to have a whole kitchen in a school to be able to do this. And not all our students have access to a kitchen. So it's important to make it accessible. But you can tether in financial literacy, climate change, lots of different topics around this. But kids being a part of that conversation is really important.
I hear you, and Mark, I want you, if you want to push back on this idea, if you think it's appropriate, only in as much as we are asking the school system to do a lot these days, and never mind credit card debt, and never mind all the other things that, I mean, it's maths, it's Englishes, it's the basics, it's civics, it's literacy, it's, there's no end to what we want the school system to do these days. Do we have the capability of also introducing into the school system the notion that that's where people are going to learn how to be aware of nutrition going forward?
It's a good question, and I think you have to ask the question, how important is it? And I think many people would agree it's very important. Being able to feed yourself, being able to feed your family, being able to have the knowledge of how to prepare healthy food is very important. So I think we have the room. I have 3 kids in high school, and I won't name the courses, but I think there are some bird courses we could do away with and replace with.
I wonder how it works in your home, because there's it's a definite habit where the kids come home from school and they do their own thing. And frankly, in a lot of cases, the parents don't want their kids in the kitchen getting in the way. They need a break from the kids. They want the kids out of the kitchen. They want to be responsible for putting the meal. And if the kids want to clean up after, that's another thing. But you're not learning any culinary skills that way. How does it work in your place?
So I think of it 2 ways. The first is just modeling good behavior. I think if my wife and I put an honest, good meal on the table every night, that will filter into their brain in some way. But the other way is teach them, if you want to eat something delicious, if you figure out how to make it yourself, you can get what you want and you can do it yourself.
Does that work?
It worked for me, and I see it working with my kids. I see they're starting to learn to cook dishes that they want to make. And the challenge is there's so many processed foods they can bring home from the supermarket and pull it to the freezer and microwave, which is an easy fix. So the challenge is to get them to actually make it themselves from ingredients.
How should we distinguish between facts, empirically provable facts, and fads that your latest favorite celebrity is pitching on social media?
I think we have to think about where we're getting our knowledge. So I don't want to slam social media because I think that it's an entertainment outlet, and if you're using it for entertainment, it can be quite entertaining. In fact, maybe it even makes you think about something, or you've heard of a term that you hadn't heard before and you might Google it. So there's some merits to it. But where we get information about how we put food into our bodies multiple times a day, I think we have to take that a lot more seriously and fact check.
Let me read a quote here. This is a Harvard primatologist, Richard Wrangham, who argues that the biggest revolution in the human diet came when we learned how to cook. And his research shows, this is interesting, mice raised on cooked foods gain 15 to 40% more weight than mice raised only on raw food. And here is his analysis. We have gotten so good at processing foods that for the first time in human evolution, many humans are getting more calories than they burn in a day. It's this shift to processed foods taking place all over the world that's contributing to a rising epidemic of obesity and related diseases. If most of the world ate more local fruits and vegetables, a little meat, fish, and some whole grains, as in the highly touted Mediterranean diet, and exercised an hour a day, that would be good news for our health and for the planet. Okay, explain that. How would that be good news for our health and the planet?
Well, I think the idea is that it'll be less environmentally destructive in terms of raising those foods versus all the energy that has to be used into processing foods. As far as the health goes, that's the idea that the Mediterranean diet is a healthier diet. And I think there's a lot of research that would suggest that it is. However, I'd also say if you go back in time 30, 40, 50 years ago, Canadians were trimmer. They were not eating a Mediterranean diet. So I don't think the conclusion has to be the Mediterranean diet. It's interesting, if you look at Italy, Northern Italians eat a less Mediterranean diet than Southerners, less fish, less olive oil, more cheese, more pork, and yet they are thinner. So I don't think it's necessarily, the danger is that people think, well, to eat healthily, I have to eat foods I don't like. I do like a lot of those foods, but some people don't. To me, it's just eat real food, keep the processed stuff out, and eat, the stuff you buy at the supermarket, produce, fruits, vegetables,
right,
whole cuts of meat.
If it's Northern versus Southern Italians, there could be a link between, say, poverty and poor nutrition, because the North is richer than the South. How do class and financial stability, in your view, Leanne, factor into this conversation?
Well, if we look at the research, almost everywhere where you have urban centers or you have low-income groups, even in rural settings, when you have lower-income groups, usually these are from the BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous, people of color, you end up having what's called food deserts, where there's not a lot of food options, there's no grocery retailers, or there's a lot of access to fast food, and that perpetuates an environment where it's historically called obesogenic. I think we're trying to move away from that term, obese, but the idea is that it promotes metabolic consequences down the road. And so that has a lot to do with social structure as well. And what we're talking about there is social determinants of health, the places that you work, live, grow, and age. What are those systems like? What's that environment like? Is it safe to go to the park and engage in physical activity? We can recommend physical activity all we want, but if people can't get outside safely to engage in physical activity, then how do they do that?
I think also a good point on that is this is the importance of teaching people how to cook, because there's this myth that processed food is cheaper than whole foods. I don't think that's true. If I take my kids to McDonald's or fast food restaurant, I got 3 kids, for the 5 of us to eat, that's, you're looking at a lot of money. If I take that money and go and buy actual food, I can actually afford to buy a nice bottle of wine.
Really? Even with the cost of produce nowadays and what inflation's done and all that?
Yeah, 'cause it depends what you're buying. If you look at things like if you buy lentils or chickpeas, you have a small, a braising cut of meat or something and make a stew out of that. It's really delicious.
What advice do you want to leave people with here?
I would say eat as the Japanese and the Italians do, which is to say it's not just about eating real food, it's about approaching every meal as an opportunity for joy. Because the more you enjoy that food, the less the processed food is appealing, and it's easier to push it out of your life.
I get a lot of joy eating at McDonald's. I shouldn't, though, should I?
I think you can get even more joy
Agreed.
eating a great pasta.
We're going to work on that going forward. Mark Schatzker, Leanne D'Souza Kenny, thanks so much for coming into TVO tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Tomorrow on the agenda.
A lot of my friends, a lot of my family members were impeded by the school system. So that for me started a trajectory to want to get into education and shatter some of the stereotypes.
That's tomorrow on the agenda.